Hey everybody, it's Tom coming to you with another of my desultory broadcasts. This evening I want to talk a bit about an essay by one Ivan Illich, In Lieu of Education. That essay is included in a volume, uh, the history of Towards the History of Needs, the collection of essays by Ivan Illich. Uh, all of those essays acting as kind of informal afterwards to other major texts by him. But I'm going to resist the temptation to go off down that kind of philological side path standpoint about In Lieu of Education. As I set out to sort of make these remarks, it occurred to me that it coincides with the onset of the school year, so there's something appropriate about it. Illich himself was deeply distrustful, critical of institutional education, especially compulsory institutional education, as a process which in many ways subverts or opposes a deeper, more authentic learning. How is this a reasonable assertion to suggest that schooling is actually at odds with learning? And the proposition arrives through some relatively careful reasoning on Illich's part. One facet of that reasoning is that through school and schooling, we are all subjected to what he terms a hidden curriculum, which at first blush has three facets attached to it. One being that the student is put in a position to apprehend that knowledge is valuable when it is transmitted to him specifically through this process of graded consumption that is sanctified by the school. Moreover, that it is through the acquisition of more and more of this knowledge, or knowledge stock if you like, that their worth as an individual to society is determined, amplified, or reduced accordingly. And thirdly, in tandem with those 2 points, you have the impression that it is more important to learn about the world than from the world, which is a kind of bastardized variation of the Aristotelian distinction between theoretical and practical knowledge. I say bastardized because theoretical knowledge under the Aristotelian or the Platonic sketch actually carries with it a set of philosophical claims whose exploration would take us apart from the real sort of point of my remarks here, but also which diverge from the manner in which Illich means knowledge about as opposed to knowledge from. And this is what he means. He means that learning is reduced to what can be transmitted as knowledge, specifically knowledge that can be packaged or commodified, or if you like in the most general sense, reified. It can be transformed into something that collected and relayed, controlled, manipulated, quantified, etc. And this kind of knowledge actually differs rather markedly from how we engage with the world in our own life. You can know everything about a bicycle, but if you haven't gotten on one, it's likely you're not going to be able at first blush to ride it. Sort of the thing at which we're sort of, gesturing here. The people are not unaware of the problems that attend to this circumstance, this reification of knowledge and its connection with these other issues, this sort of propagandized version of learning, this ersatz learning. And he has some critical remarks, though, because a lot of times the efforts to counter that themselves fall into the very trap they're trying to elude. But before turning to that, I should go further down to another implication of this hidden curriculum. beyond the manner in which it reifies knowledge or commodifies knowledge into something else. It creates the basis of a new and different class structure, beyond that sense of class structure which we have under a feudal dispensation or even under a industrial or classically capitalist foundation. What we have is a class structure that undergirds a technocracy, and here we get sort of like the pith of why he's critical of lots of reform efforts. Even some efforts that would be willing to countenance the disestablishment of school, for which he himself is actually an advocate. As long as you permit this technocratically friendly account of knowing and learning to be the dominant one, you're going to leave in place a series of philosophical and connected to that political and economic claims, which legitimate the protection and privileging of a specific stratum of society, namely those who can access and control those knowledge and knowledges which which they esteem as worthwhile. All of this actually dovetails the broader critique of Illich of institutional processes at large, especially institutional processes that come to a certain scale. We can maybe talk about that at another remove. But we also see now what's wrong with the idea of sending everybody to school. Sending everybody to school, actually, the way we do it now, can be fundamentally disabling, can fundamentally incapacitate, that perhaps is a better word, incapacitate people, because it actually alienates them from their lived experience with and through the world, nature, society, etc., and trains them to disregard their own native intelligence, their own vital competence, to invoke a phrase that Illich uses in this essay. And we're running up on time, but I want to add one other gloss that he inserts within the essay. More than a gloss, but it's a characterization of what he's talking about very broadly. He notes it like this, that schooling really is a collection of rituals through which a particular myth, the myth of education, is embodied. And that myth is essentially the idea that our ability to be of worth is connected to our being subjected to certain institutional processes by certain people. It voids the notion of our innate value. And this structural problem is why Illich actually declaims contemporary schooling is fundamentally illegitimate, and it's something we need to move beyond. The complement, the positive recommendation that he advances is that we reacquaint ourselves with our ability to learn autonomously and in active relationship with ourselves in the world. It is to move from a condition of industriality or technocracy to one of conviviality, which is the ideal he sets forth in another work of his, Tools for Conviviality, to which I might return subsequently. Some thoughts for you this evening. I hope you found them engaging and stimulating, and at all events, thank you for listening. By the way, check out the essay, Ivan Illich in Lieu of Education. Have a good night.